Hello, everybody. Welcome yet again, another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. Friends, fellow investors, we always say about being on trends, and certainly one of the biggest trends right now, and it's really showing no sign of slowing down, is energy storage. Anything in that space is really, the world is going to look very different in 10 years than it does today. And with us, we have a return guest. We have Tim Harris from Redflow. And for those of you that don't know, a lot has changed since we've spoken to the company last. And it's not just the share price, but the business itself has really changed. And here to talk all about it again, hey, Tim, welcome back.
Hey, Greg, great to be back.
Thanks. Hey, Tim, for those that didn't see our first interview, can you just give people a brief background on yourself?
So we're an Australian ASX listed company headquartered here in Brisbane that is focused on designing and manufacturing zinc bromine flow batteries. And so we have now about 100 deployments around the world. Our headquarters are here in Brisbane, and we also have our ISO 9001 manufacturing facilities in Thailand.
Absolutely. And for those that aren't as familiar with flow batteries, can you just describe maybe a little bit more detail about what are the uses of them and how do they work from a high level?
Flow batteries as a chemistry has been around for quite a long time, but they're really coming into their own now as we're starting to see more and more renewable energy start to hit the energy ecosystem. So flow batteries are consistent of electrolyte. In our case, that flows, we use a zinc and bromine based chemistry that plates and deplates zinc over electrode surfaces. So using a couple of pumps. So you can kind of think of ourselves as a small machine rather than a static system. What flow batteries are really good for is storing and providing energy over a medium to longer term duration period. So, and doing that repeatedly and using 100% of the energy that you store in our battery. So very often we compare lithium batteries to sprinters. You need a lot of that power for things like EV. We're more like a marathon runner. So there's different chemistries for different things, but we're seeing that requirement for longer duration storage as more and more renewable energy comes onto the grid is one of the things that we're very excited about and well positioned for.
Absolutely. And I'd say, is this a fair way to describe it? Is that 10 years ago, we all knew about solar and about power. And even a lot of us would get letters in the mail asking us to sell our power or something of that nature. But people didn't really, there wasn't a good way to store that energy. Is that where Redflow plays?
Well, I think if you think about the future, and I think there's no doubt that the world is moving towards a renewable-based system. Now, that's for reasons of global warming, but I think increasingly you're seeing the commercial case for green energy versus old fossil fuel-based elements like coal, et cetera. And you're seeing that playing out in the Australian market, and you're seeing that playing out elsewhere. If you think about a reliable energy ecosystem, which is using a lot of renewable energy, storage sits at the heart of that. You can generate a lot of energy through PV and wind during the day, but what happens when the sun is not shining and when your wind turbines are not working? But having effective, affordable energy storage is really the core part we think of a renewable energy future. And I think people are starting to increasingly see that, not only in terms of storage to stabilize the grid, but also starting to shift some of that excess energy that you're now generating from the day as you're getting more and more renewables into the system, be able to go and deploy that at night. And you're seeing that happen in some markets like South Australia, where you're getting more and more negative pricing coming through the day as you're getting more and more renewable energy starting to support that system. That's ideal for us. So we can store that energy and then deploy that when prices are high and when you can't rely on that renewable energy when the sun is not there.
Absolutely. And, and specifically within Redflow, you have spent an awful lot of energy, so to speak, on developing your product. Can you just talk a little bit, and maybe not too technical, what makes Redflow's product unique?
So we concentrate on a particular chemistry, which is a zinc bromine chemistry. There's a number of different other flow battery chemistries out there, the most popular being vanadium. We think we've got some competitive advantages with our core chemistry, our zinc bromine chemistry. versus lithium, but also versus other flow batteries as well. The first one that we kind of see ourselves as differentiated against lithium is that ability to use 100% of the energy, work day in, day out, and really ideally suited for longer, sort of medium to longer term duration requirements, so 3-4 hours plus. We don't also have risks like thermal runaway, and clearly there's been some concerns in Australia about some producers about the risk of that fire risk with lithium-based systems. And we can also work in high temperatures, so we don't need expensive air conditioning and cooling in hot environments. So there's some of the differentiator against lithium. When we compare ourselves against other flow batteries, we also have a number of advantages. Firstly, we have the most abundant cheap materials in the world in terms of zinc and bromine. So from a real raw cost material basis, we have an advantage, particularly against vanadium that has a lot of high volatility. The second thing is that we have much higher energy density and efficiency than other flow batteries. So we believe that puts it at a really strong competitive advantage when we look at some of our peers in the industry. The other thing I'd probably emphasize is that we've decided to dedicate our efforts on a single modular 10 kilowatt hour system. That allows us to do two things. That allows us to play in markets such as telco, where you only need 1 or 2 batteries to provide backup, which your audience would have seen from the exciting Optus announcement that we made last month. But secondly, we can modularize that to go all the way up to the megawatt hour type size and scale that we announced last week in the US. And the benefits of that means that we're producing one battery that we think has huge potential in terms of automation and driving that cost down through modern manufacturing processes as we start to scale up production. And we think that's a really core competitive advantage that we can leverage as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So said, if a project requires just maybe like one battery, you can deliver that. And if it requires 20, you can effectively daisy, I don't know if this is the right daisy chain.
Yeah, and it's using exactly the same battery, so you don't have to think about different models, and you can really just focus on that automation, getting costs down, approaches according to that. So the project that we're doing in the US is using 192 batteries of exactly the same batteries that we're using for, in the towers with Optus here in Australia. So we think that provides us enormous opportunity to attack lots of different markets with really the same product.
Right. And I assume, and I want to touch obviously on the USA announcement for sure, but from a cost of goods sold perspective for Redflow, does that help you as far as your manufacturing?
Oh, it most certainly does. I mean, it means that we're not sort of needing to get 2 different production lines for 2 different products. That's clearly an advantage from that perspective. And all of our focus can be on raising quality and getting cost down out of the battery and repeatability. So your opportunities for efficiencies, for driving for the cost down with suppliers, introduction of automation becomes really, really straightforward. And we've had, we believe that kind of form factor just lends itself much more naturally towards automation. Now we're in Thailand at the moment. Our current production processes are still quite labor intensive, but we see lots and lots of low hanging fruit as we move to our Gen 3 product, automate a lot of those processes and drive the cost out. And we know that we can get further cost out in terms of volume differences. So that provides us a really strong glide path down as we scale up our volume.
Absolutely. And speaking of volume, in the case of you and Redflow, you have actually had some serious wins over the last, call it, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Maybe can you just touch on them a little bit? Whether it's Optus in California, or anything else. I'd love to hear more about it.
Well, I think there's probably 4 things that I love to talk about and that's happened over the last 3 or 4 months. 2 of those just happened just before Christmas, and the other 2 have happened in the last couple of weeks. The first 2 that we announced before Christmas was firstly an announcement that we made about a 600 kilowatt hour system for an agricultural deployment in Western Australia. That's with a really strong partner over there called TIAC. This is important for a number of reasons. It's a really strong, I think, again, extension of what we've been doing in the agricultural space in Australia, again, reflecting that hot climate, need for regular use, non-fire risk type elements. But it allows us to kind of think about our battery as a large-scale battery. So the ability to operate at multiples of our batteries and at high voltage. So we're particularly kind of excited about that, and that was a bit of a stake in the ground for us. The second thing that we announced just before Christmas was the initial customer trial of our Gen 3 product. I think as we spoke before, Greg, with the COVID situation that we had last year, we really ring-fenced our resources and bunkered down a bit and really strove to progress Gen 3 very aggressively. So we were delighted to announce, as per our plan, that we had our first customer trials of the Gen 3 product just at the end of the year here in Brisbane. So that program is going really well. And the core part of that is Gen 3 sets the basis for us to get further cost out of the battery. We're targeting at least a 30% cost down compared to our current Gen 2.5. The customer sees no difference. So they get exactly the same performance parameters, but it's really setting a key foundation for getting costs down and driving that automation into our production processes. So that was, again, we think a really key milestone, and we think Gen 3, and as we start to move into automation, is really sits at the heart of our business. And then the two other announcements that we made in 2021 was firstly our partnership with Optus with the Australian Network Fire Resiliency Program, which is putting our batteries into a number of their sites across Australia in terms of their network hardening program. So we were delighted to host Minister Paul Fletcher at Redflow along with senior executives from Optus to announce that. And that's really the culmination of, I think, Optus having our batteries in their network previously in the Daintree Forest, seeing how it's operating and making the decision that we've got really strong technology that's going to be a core part of that infrastructure. And that reflects also some innovations that we did along that period, which allows our batteries to basically be put in standby mode, which is really ideal for that kind of bushfire resiliency type application. So that's we think a really strong tick and endorsement from Australia's second largest telco company, and clearly we're looking and loving to do more in that kind of telco space. And then the last one is clearly the most recent is the announcement of our largest ever sale, which was the sale of a 2 megawatt-hour system into California that we were kind of delighted to announce last week. I mean, we've always kept an eye on the US market. Clearly, it's one of the largest energy storage markets in the world, and California is one of the most progressive, I think, in terms of energy storage requirements, but also supporting alternative technologies to lithium. And so we think that's a potential inflection point for us as a company, and opens, we think, a very strong beachhead for us to go and target further opportunities in California and the broader US market. And so, we're delighted about that, and we're delighted to be working with Energia in this important project.
Absolutely. And, obviously, I think that, and it's important for viewers to know, you have a lot more than just the headlines. A lot of times the devil's in the detail and the execution. You have a team that has had a lot of US experience already. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, look, we've had, our CTO when he was previously working for Redflow, was actually based in the US for a couple of years. And our CTO, Trudy Walsh, has also been the Australian representative for some very large US companies. So we're and I've worked a lot in the US as well. So we're pretty familiar with the market there. And we're very excited about it. And clearly with the new Biden administration coming through, the renewed commitment to the Paris Agreement, we're seeing some real tailwinds starting to occur in the energy storage space. And your viewers might have noticed the challenges around Texas only earlier this month. And that's also, I think, pushing towards what is the role of energy storage, what we can do around energy storage itself. So we think there's enormous opportunities for us in the commercial, industrial, in the mobile space, potentially in the utility space in California, also in other markets. So we do want to recognize that, we want to walk before we can run, but we think this opens the door to, a huge amount of opportunity in the US over the coming months and years.
Absolutely. And, where you have a product where, as you said, there's so many different applications. Sometimes you get spoiled for choice and lose focus, if you know what I mean. But what would you like to see ideally out of Redflow over the next 12 months? Like, what would be your definition of success?
Look, I mean, I think we clearly want to execute on the programs that we have. You know, Optus is an important flagship for us, and clearly our partnership with Energia in the US, it's important that we execute on those well. But I think, as we said before, Greg, we think they provide us the stepping stones, the confidence, and the ability to start to move into megawatt-hour type systems. And we've been kind of signaling for a little while now that we think there's major opportunities in that market for us. So we'll still to provide and still support our telco customers. At the same time, we think there's lots of opportunities in that larger commercial and industrial space, because we're seeing much more commitment towards 100% renewable energy, because we're seeing things like peak demand costs starting to really bite into some customers in terms of some of our markets. But what I'd love to see in probably the next 12 months is a number of those other projects starting to come through, expand our presence and our profile, not only in our markets in Australia, but also in the US. And then he's really start to roll out our Gen 3 product that sits at the heart of us driving our costs down and automation to drive up volume.
Absolutely. So you really, ideally, you could almost create this perfect scenario of you get some revenue and also at the same time get your cost down through Gen 3.
Look, we're getting more and more confident about where we think that we can be at volume in terms of our competitiveness, and that's from a dollars per kilowatt hour, but also from the levelized cost of storage days, because we've got some of these different characteristics, particularly at medium duration storage requirements for versus lithium. So I think those elements are coming together, and I think it really sits at the heart of, we now think that we've got a product that is scalable, it's sellable. We can deploy that into smaller systems, we can deploy it into larger systems, and we're going to have a number of proof points and reference points that shows the ability of our battery to be able to perform at these kind of levels. So that's very exciting for us, and I think it's an inflection point for the company, because it makes, I think, our end customers and hopefully investors realize that we're just not small, we can actually be large. And you know, we're starting to see a lot more large energy storage systems here in Australia and elsewhere start to be deployed, and we think that we can play in that space.
Absolutely. Hey, Tim, we try to keep these things short, and obviously, you know, Redflow is at an inflection point. Do you have any closing comments for the audience?
Well, look, I think we're very excited. I mean, 2020 was a year that we, you know, faced some pretty significant headwinds with COVID. I think we've sort of reacted well to that. I think we've done some of the basics, and the announcements that we've seen over the last couple of months is a really reflection of that hard work. We're very excited about the future. We've got some great tailwinds behind us in terms of that demand for energy storage starting to increase. We're seeing lots of customers demand renewable energy commitments. So we think that's only good for us and good for our positioning. And clearly, entry into markets like the US just raises our profile and the level of opportunities for us exponentially. Absolutely.
Thank you, Tim, and definitely stay in touch and come back again.
Great. Thanks so much. Lovely to touch base, and thanks to all your viewers.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.